Very well then, when we get to sea I shall soon know, for the vessel will rock right enough in the swell offshore, even though there be no wind. Unless I am aboard a battleship or big cruiser, and this I fancy can hardly be. But hark, if I mistake not, no, it was not imagination, I hear footsteps. Someone is approaching the side of the compartment where the door is. One of the crew, no doubt. Are they going to let me out at last? I can now hear voices. A conversation is going on outside the door, but it is carried on in a language that I do not understand. I shout to them, I shout again, but no answer is vouchsafed. There is nothing to do then, but wait, wait, wait. I keep repeating the word, and it rings in my ears like a bell. Let me try to calculate how long I have been here. The ship must have been underway for at least 4 or 5 hours. I reckon it must be past midnight, but I cannot tell, for unfortunately my watch is of no use to me in this Cimmerian darkness. Now, if we have been going for 5 hours, we must have cleared Pamlico Sound, whether we issued by Ocracoke or Hatteras Inlet, and must be off the coast a good mile at least. Yet I haven't felt any motion from the swell of the sea. It is inexplicable, incredible. Come now, have I made a mistake? Am I the dupe of an illusion? Am I not imprisoned in the hold of a ship underway? Another hour has passed, and the movement of the ship suddenly ceases. I realize perfectly that she is stationary. Has she reached her destination? In this event, we can only be in one of the coast ports to the north or south of Pamlico Sound. But why should Thomas Rock be landed again? The abduction must soon have been discovered, and our kidnappers would run the greatest risk of falling into the hands of the authorities if they attempted to disembark. However this may be, if the vessel is coming to anchor, I shall hear the noise of the chain as it is paid out, and feel the jerk as the ship is brought up. I know that sound and that jerk well from experience, and I am bound to hear and feel them in a minute or two. I wait, I listen. A dead and disquieting silence reigns on board. I begin to wonder whether I am not the only living being in the ship. Now I feel an irresistible torpor coming over me. The air is vitiated. I cannot breathe. My chest is bursting. I try to resist, but it is impossible to do so. The temperature rises to such a degree that I am compelled to divest myself of part of my clothing. Then I lie me down in a corner. My heavy eyelids close, and I sink into a prostration that eventually forces me into heavy slumber. How long have I been asleep? I cannot say. Is it night? Is it day? I know not. I remark, however, that I breathe more easily and that the air is no longer poisoned carbonic acid. Was the air renewed while I slept? Has the door been opened? Has anybody been in here? Yes, here is the proof of it. In feeling about, my hand has come in contact with a mug filled with a liquid that exhales an inviting odor. I raise it to my lips, which are burning, for I am suffering such an agony of thirst that I would even drink brackish water. It is ale, an ale of excellent quality, which refreshes and comforts me, and I drain the pint to the last drop. But if they have not condemned me to die of thirst, neither have they condemned me to die of hunger, I suppose. No, for in one of the corners I find a basket, and this basket contains some bread and cold meat. I fall to, eating greedily, and my strength little by little returns. Decidedly, I am not so abandoned as I thought I was. Someone entered this obscure hole, and the open door admitted a little of the oxygen from the outside, without which I should have been suffocated. Then the wherewithal to quench my thirst and appease the pangs of hunger was placed within my reach. How much longer will this incarceration last? Days, months? I cannot estimate the hours that have elapsed since I fell asleep, nor have I any idea as to what time of the day or night it may be. I was careful to wind up my watch, though, and perhaps by feeling the hands, yes, I think the little hand marks 8 o'clock in the morning, no doubt. What I do know, however, is that the ship is not in motion. There is not the slightest quiver. Hours and hours, weary, interminable hours go by, and I wonder whether they are again waiting till night comes on to renew my stock of air and provisions. Yes, they are waiting to take advantage of my slumbers. But this time I am resolved to resist. I will feign to be asleep, and I shall know how to force an answer from whoever enters. Chapter 6. On deck. Here I am in the open air, breathing freely once more. I have at last been hauled out of that stifling box and taken on deck. I gaze around me in every direction and see no sign of land. On every hand is that circular line which defines earth and sky. No, there is not even a speck of land to be seen to the west, where the coast of North America extends for thousands of miles. The setting sun now throws but slanting rays upon the bosom of the ocean. It must be about 6 o'clock in the evening. I take out my watch, and it marks 13 minutes past 6. As I have already mentioned, I waited for the door of my prison to open, thoroughly resolved not to fall asleep again, but to spring upon the first person who entered and force him to answer my questions. I was not aware then that it was day, but it was, and hour after hour passed and no one came. I began to suffer again from hunger and thirst, for I had not preserved either bite or sup. As soon as I awoke, I felt that the ship was in motion again, after having, I calculated, remained stationary since the previous day, no doubt in some lonely creek, since I had not heard or felt her come to anchor. A few minutes ago, it must therefore have been 6 o'clock, I again heard footsteps on the other side of the iron wall of my compartment. Was anybody coming to my cell? Yes, for I heard the creaking of the bolts as they were drawn back, and then the door opened, and the darkness in which I had been plunged since the first hour of my captivity was illumined by the light of a lantern. 2 men, whom I had no time to look at, entered and seized me by the arms. A thick cloth was thrown over my head, which was enveloped in such a manner that I could see absolutely nothing. What did it all mean? What were they going to do with me? I struggled, but they held me in an iron grasp. I questioned them, but they made no reply. The men spoke to each other in a language that I could not understand and had never heard before. They stood upon no ceremony with me. It is true I was only a madhouse warder, and they probably did not consider it necessary to do so. But I question very much whether Simon Hart, the engineer, would have received any more courtesy at their hands. This time, however, no attempt was made to gag me nor to bind either my arms or legs. I was simply restrained by main force from breaking away from them. In a moment I was dragged out of the compartment and pushed along a narrow passage. Next, the steps of a metallic stairway resounded under our feet. Then the fresh air blew in my face, and I inhaled it with avidity. Finally they took their hands from off me, and I found myself free. I immediately tore the cloth off my head and gazed about me. I am on board a schooner which is ripping through the water at a great rate, and leaving a long white trail behind her. I had to clutch at one of the stays for support, dazzled as I was by the light after my 48 hours' imprisonment in complete obscurity. On the deck, a dozen men with rough, weather-beaten faces come and go, very dissimilar types of men, to whom it would be impossible to attribute any particular nationality. They scarcely take any notice of me. As to the schooner, I estimate that she registers from 250 to 300 tons. She has a fairly wide beam, her masts are strong and lofty, and her large spread of canvas must carry her along at a spanking rate in a good breeze. Aft, a grizzly-faced man is at the wheel, and he is keeping her head to the sea that is running pretty high. I try to find out the name of the vessel, but it is not to be seen anywhere, even on the life buoys. I walk up to one of the sailors and inquire, "What is the name of this ship?" No answer, and I fancy the man does not understand me. "Where is the captain?" I continue. But the sailor pays no more heed to this than he did to the previous question. I turn on my heel and go forward. Above the forward hatchway a bell is suspended. Maybe the name of the schooner is engraved upon it. I examine it, but can find no name upon it. I then return to the stern and address the man at the wheel. He gazes at me sourly, shrugs his shoulders, and bending, grasps the spokes of the wheel solidly, and brings the schooner, which had been headed off by a large wave from port, stem on to sea again. Seeing that nothing is to be got from that quarter, I turn away and look about to see if I can find Thomas Rock, but I do not perceive him anywhere. Is he not on board? He must be. They could have had no reason for carrying me off alone. No one could have had any idea that I was Simon Hart, the engineer, and even had they known it, what interest could they have had in me, and what could they expect of me? Therefore, as Rock is not on deck, I conclude that he is locked in one of the cabins, and trust he has met with better treatment than his ex-guardian. But what is this, and how on earth could I have failed to notice it before? How is this schooner moving? Her sails are furled, there is not an inch of canvas set, the wind has fallen, and the few puffs that occasionally come from the east are unfavorable, in view of the fact that we are going in that very direction. And yet the schooner speeds through the sea, her bows down, throwing off clouds of foam, and leaving a long, milky, undulating trail in her wake. Is she a steam yacht? No, there is not a smokestack about her. Is she propelled by electricity, by a battery of accumulators, or by piles of great power that work her screw and send her along at this rate? I can come to no other conclusion. In any case, she must be fitted with a screw, and by leaning over the stern, I shall be able to see it, and can find out what sets it working afterwards. The man at the wheel watches me ironically as I approach, but makes no effort to prevent me from looking over. I gaze long and earnestly, but there is no foaming and seething of the water such as is invariably caused by the revolutions of the screw. Not, but the long white furrow that a sailing vessel leaves behind is discernible in the schooner's wake. Then, what kind of a machine is it that imparts such a marvelous speed to the vessel? As I have already said, the wind is against her, and there is a heavy swell on. I will know. No one pays the slightest attention, and I again go forward. As I approach the forecastle, I find myself face to face with a man who is leaning nonchalantly on the raised hatchway, and who is watching me. He seems to be waiting for me to speak to him. I recognize him instantly. He is the person who accompanied the Count d'Artigas during the latter's visit to Healthful House. There can be no mistake, it is he right enough. It was then that rich foreigner who abducted Thomas Rock, and I am on board the Ebba, his schooner yacht, which is so well known on the American coast. The man before me will enlighten me about what I want to know. I remember that he and the Count spoke English together. I take him to be the captain of the schooner. Captain, I say, you are the person I saw at Healthful House. You remember me, of course. He looks me up and down, but does not condescend to reply. I am Warder Gaydon, the attendant of Thomas Rock. I continue, and I want to know why you have carried me off and placed me on board this schooner. The captain interrupts me with a sign. It is not made to me, however, but to some sailors standing near. They catch me by the arms, and taking no notice of the angry movement that I cannot restrain, bundle me down the hatchway. The hatchway stair in reality, I remark, is a perpendicular iron ladder, at the bottom of which, to right and left, are some cabins, and forward, the men's quarters. Are they going to put me back in my dark prison, at the bottom of the hold? No, they turn to the left and push me into a cabin. It is lighted by a porthole, which is open, and through which the fresh air comes in gusts from the briny. The furniture consists of a bunk, a chair, a chest of drawers, a wash-hand stand, and a table. The latter is spread for dinner, and I sit down. Then the cook's mate comes in with 2 or 3 dishes. He is a colored lad, and as he is about to withdraw, I try to question him, but he, too, vouchsafes no reply. Perhaps he doesn't understand me. The door is closed, and I fall to and eat with an excellent appetite, with the intention of putting off all further questioning till some future occasion when I shall stand a chance of getting answered. It is true I am a prisoner, but this time I am comfortable enough, and I hope I shall be permitted to occupy this cabin for the remainder of the voyage, and not be lowered into that black hole again. I now give myself up to my thoughts, the first of which is that it was the Count d'Artigas who planned the abduction, that it was he who is responsible for the kidnapping of Thomas Rock, and that consequently the French inventor must be just as comfortably installed somewhere on board the schooner. But who is this Count d'Artigas? Where does he hail from? If he has seized Thomas Rock, is it not because he is determined to secure the secret of the fulgurator at no matter what cost? Very likely, and I must therefore be careful not to betray my identity, for if they knew the truth, I should never be afforded a chance to get away. But what a lot of mysteries to clear up, how many inexplicable things to explain, the origin of this d'Artigas, his intentions as to the future, whither we are bound, the port to which the schooner belongs, and this mysterious progress through the water without sails and without screws, at a speed of at least 10 knots an hour. The air becoming keener as night deepens, I close and secure the porthole, and as my cabin is bolted on the outside, the best thing I can do is to get into my bunk and let myself be gently rocked to sleep by the broad Atlantic in this mysterious cradle, the Ebba. The next morning I rise at daybreak, and having performed my ablutions, dress myself and wait. Presently the idea of trying the door occurs to me. I find that it has been unbolted, and pushing it open, climb the iron ladder and emerge on deck. The crew are washing down the deck, and standing aft and conversing are two men, one of whom is the captain. The latter manifests no surprise at seeing me and indicates my presence to his companion by a nod. This other man, whom I have never before seen, is an individual of about 50 years of age, whose dark hair is streaked with gray. His features are delicately chiseled, his eyes are bright, and his expression is intelligent and not at all displeasing. He is somewhat of the Grecian type, and I have no doubt that he is of Hellenic origin when I hear him called Serko, Engineer Serko, by the captain of the Ebba. As to the latter, he is called Spade, Captain Spade, and this name has an Italian twang about it. Thus there is a Greek, an Italian, and a crew recruited from every corner of the earth to man a schooner with a Norwegian name. This mixture strikes me as being suspicious. And that Count d'Artigas, with his Spanish name and Asiatic type, where does he come from? Captain Spade and Engineer Serko continue to converse in a low tone of voice. The former is keeping a sharp eye on the man at the wheel, who does not appear to pay any particular attention to the compass in front of him. He seems to pay more heed to the gestures of one of the sailors stationed forward, and who signals to him to put the helm to port or to starboard. Thomas Rock is near them, gazing vacantly out upon the vast expanse which is not limited on the horizon by a single speck of land. Two sailors watch his every movement. It is evidently feared that the madman may possibly attempt to jump overboard. I wonder whether I shall be permitted to communicate with my ward. I walk towards him, and Captain Spade and Engineer Serko watch me. Thomas Rock doesn't see me coming, and I stand beside him. Still he takes no notice of me and makes no movement. His eyes, which sparkle brightly, wander over the ocean, and he draws in deep breaths of the salt, vivifying atmosphere. Added to the air surcharged with oxygen is a magnificent sunset in a cloudless sky. Does he perceive the change in his situation? Has he already forgotten about Healthful House, the pavilion in which he was a prisoner, and Gaydon, his keeper? It is highly probable. The past has presumably been effaced from his memory, and he lives solely in the present. In my opinion, even on the deck of the Ebba, in the middle of the sea, Thomas Rock is still the helpless, irresponsible man whom I tended for 15 months. His intellectual condition has undergone no change, and his reason will return only when he is spoken to about his inventions. The Count d'Artigas is perfectly aware of this mental disposition, having had a proof of it during his visit, and he evidently relies thereon to surprise sooner or later the inventor's secret. But with what object? Thomas Rock, I exclaim. My voice seems to strike him, and after gazing at me fixedly for an instant, he averts his eyes quickly. I take his hand and press it. He withdraws it brusquely and walks away, without having recognized me, in the direction of Captain Spade and Engineer Serko. Does he think of speaking to one or other of these men? And if they speak to him, will he be more reasonable than he was with me, and reply to them? At this moment, his physiognomy lights up with a gleam of intelligence. His attention, obviously, has been attracted by the queer progress of the schooner. He gazes at the masts and the furled sails. Then he turns back and stops at the place where, if the Ebba were a steamer, the funnel ought to be, and which in this case ought to be belching forth a cloud of black smoke. What appeared so strange to me evidently strikes Thomas Rock as being strange, too. He cannot explain what I found inexplicable, and, as I did, he walks aft to see if there is a screw. On the flanks of the Ebba, a shoal of porpoises are sporting. Swift as is the schooner's course, they easily pass her, leaping and gambolling in their native element with surprising grace and agility. Thomas Rock pays no attention to them, but leans over the stern. Engineer Serko and Captain Spade, fearful lest he should fall overboard, hurry to him and drag him gently but firmly away. I observe from long experience that Rock is a prey to violent excitement. He turns about and gesticulates, uttering incoherent phrases the while. It is plain to me that another fit is coming on, similar to the one he had in the pavilion of Healthful House on the night we were abducted. He will have to be seized and carried down to his cabin, and I shall perhaps be summoned to attend to him. Meanwhile, Engineer Serko and Captain Spade do not lose sight of him for a moment. They are evidently curious to see what he will do. After walking towards the mainmast and assuring himself that the sails are not set, he goes up to it and flinging his arms around it, tries with all his might to shake it, as though seeking to pull it down. Finding his efforts futile, he quits it and goes to the foremast, where the same performance is gone through. He waxes more and more excited. His vague utterances are followed by inarticulate cries. Suddenly he rushes to the port stays and clings to them, and I begin to fear that he will leap into the rigging and climb to the crosstree, where he might be precipitated into the sea by a lurch of the ship. On a sign from Captain Spade, some sailors run up and try to make him relinquish his grasp of the stays, but are unable to do so. I know that during his fits he is endowed with the strength of 10 men, and many a time I have been compelled to summon assistance in order to overpower him. Other members of the crew, however, come up, and the unhappy madman is borne to the deck, where 2 big sailors hold him down, despite his extraordinary strength. The only thing to do is to convey him to his cabin, and let him lie there till he gets over his fit. This is what will be done in conformity with orders given by a newcomer, whose voice seems familiar to me. I turn and recognize him. He is the Count d'Artigas, with a frown on his face and an imperious manner, just as I had seen him at Healthful House. I at once advance toward him. I want an explanation and mean to have it. "By what right, sir?" I begin. "By the right of might," replies the Count. Then he turns on his heel, and Thomas Rock is carried below. Chapter 7. 2 days at sea. Perhaps, should circumstances render it necessary, I may be induced to tell the Count d'Artigas that I am Simon Hart, the engineer. Who knows but what I may receive more consideration than if I remain Warder Gaydon? This measure, however, demands reflection. I have always been dominated by the thought that if the owner of the Ebba kidnapped the French inventor, it was in the hope of getting possession of Rock's fulgurator, for which neither the old nor new continent would pay the impossible price demanded. In that case, the best thing I can do is to remain Warder Gaydon, on the chance that I may be allowed to continue in attendance upon him. In this way, if Thomas Rock should ever divulge his secret, I may learn what it was impossible to do at Healthful House, and can act accordingly. Meanwhile, where is the Ebba bound? First question. Who and what is the Count d'Artigas? Second question. The first will be answered in a few days' time, no doubt, in view of the rapidity with which we are ripping through the water, under the action of a means of propulsion that I shall end by finding out all about. As regards the second, I am by no means so sure that my curiosity will ever be gratified. In my opinion, this enigmatical personage has an all-important reason for hiding his origin, and I am afraid there is no indication by which I can gauge his nationality. If the Count d'Artigas speaks English fluently, and I was able to assure myself of that fact during his visit to Pavilion No. 17, he pronounces it with a harsh, vibrating accent, which is not to be found among the peoples of northern latitudes. I do not remember ever to have heard anything like it in the course of my travels either in the Old or New World, unless it be the harshness characteristic of the idioms in use among the Malays. And in truth, with his olive, verging on copper-tinted skin, his jet-black, crinkly hair, his piercing, deep-set, restless eyes, his square shoulders and marked muscular development, it is by no means unlikely that he belongs to one of the extreme Eastern races. I believe this name of d'Artigas is an assumed one, and his title of Count likewise. If his schooner bears a Norwegian name, he at any rate is not of Scandinavian origin. He has nothing of the races of Northern Europe about him. But whoever and whatever he may be, this man abducted Thomas Rock, and me with him, with no good intention, I'll be bound. But what I should like to know is, has he acted as the agent of a foreign power or on his own account? Does he wish to profit alone by Thomas Rock's invention, and is he in the position to dispose of it profitably? That is another question that I cannot yet answer. Maybe I shall be able to find out from what I hear and see ere I make my escape, if escape be possible. The Ebba continues on her way in the same mysterious manner. I am free to walk about the deck, without, however, being able to go beyond the fore hatchway. Once I attempted to go as far as the bows where I could, by leaning over, perceive the schooner's stem as it cut through the water. But acting, it was plain, on orders received, the watch on deck turned me back, and one of them, addressing me brusquely in harsh, grating English, said, Go back, go back. You are interfering with the working of the ship. With the working of the ship, there was no working. Did they realize that I was trying to discover by what means the schooner was propelled? Very likely, and Captain Spade, who had looked on, must have known it too. Even a hospital attendant could not fail to be astonished at the fact that a vessel without either screw or sails was going along at such a speed. However this may be, for some reason or other, the bows of the Ebba are barred to me. Toward 10 o'clock a breeze springs up, a northwest wind and very favorable, and Captain Spade gives an order to the boatswain. The latter immediately pipes all hands on deck, and the mainsail, the foresail, staysail and jibs are hoisted. The work could not have been executed with greater regularity and discipline on board a man-o'-war. The Ebba now has a slight list to port, and her speed is notably increased. But the motor continues to push her along, as is evident from the fact that the sails are not always as full as they ought to be if the schooner were bowling along solely under their action. However, they continue to render yeoman's service, for the breeze has set in steadily. The sky is clear, for the clouds in the west disappear as soon as they attain the horizon, and the sunlight dances on the water. My preoccupation now is to find out as near as possible where we are bound for. I am a good enough sailor to be able to estimate the approximate speed of a ship. In my opinion, the Ebba has been traveling at the rate of from 10 to 11 knots an hour. As to the direction we have been going in, it is always the same, and I have been able to verify this by casual glances at the binnacle. If the fore part of the vessel is barred to warder gate on, he has been allowed a free run of the remainder of it. Time and again I have glanced at the compass, and noticed that the needle invariably pointed to the east, or to be exact, east-southeast. These are the conditions in which we are navigating this part of the Atlantic Ocean, which is bounded on the west by the coast of the United States of America. I appeal to my memory. What are the islands or groups of islands to be found in the direction we are going, ere the continent of the Old World is reached? North Carolina, which the schooner quitted 48 hours ago, is traversed by the 35th parallel of latitude, and this parallel, extending eastward, must, if I mistake not, cut the African coast at Morocco. But along the line, about 3,000 miles from America, are the Azores. Is it presumable that the Ebba is heading for this archipelago, that the port to which she belongs is somewhere in these islands which constitute one of Portugal's insular domains? I cannot admit such an hypothesis. Besides, before the Azores, on the line of the 35th parallel, is the Bermuda Group, which belongs to England. It seems to me to be a good deal less hypothetical that, if the Count d'Artigas was entrusted with the abduction of Thomas Rock by a European power at all, it was by the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The possibility, however, remains that he may be acting solely in his own interest. 3 or 4 times during the day Count d'Artigas has come aft and remained for some time, scanning the surrounding horizon attentively. When a sail or the smoke from a steamer heaves in sight, he examines the passing vessel for a considerable time with a powerful telescope. I may add that he has not once condescended to notice my presence on deck. Now and then Captain Spade joins him and both exchange a few words in a language that I can neither understand nor recognize. It is with Engineer Serko, however, that the owner of the Ebba converses more readily than with anybody else, and the latter appears to be very intimate with him. The engineer is a good deal more free, more loquacious and less surly than his companions, and I wonder what position he occupies on the schooner. Is he a personal friend of the Count d'Artigas? Does he scour the seas with him, sharing the enviable life enjoyed by the rich yachtsman? He is the only man of the lot who seems to manifest, if not sympathy with, at least some interest in me. I have not seen Thomas Rock all day. He must be shut in his cabin, still under the influence of the fit that came upon him last night. I feel certain that this is so, when about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just as he is about to go below, the Count beckons me to approach. I do not know what he wishes to say to me, this Count d'Artigas, but I do know what I will say to him. Do these fits to which Thomas Rock is subject last long? He asks me in English. Sometimes 48 hours, I reply. What is to be done? Nothing at all. Let him alone until he falls asleep. After a night's sleep the fit will be over, and Thomas Rock will be his own helpless self again. Very well, Warder Gaydon, you will continue to attend him as you did at Healthful House, if it be necessary. To attend to him. Yes, on board the schooner, pending our arrival. Where? Where we shall be tomorrow afternoon, replies the Count. Tomorrow, I say to myself, then we are not bound for the coast of Africa, nor even the Azores. There only remains the hypothesis that we are making for the Bermudas. Count d'Artigas is about to go down the hatchway when I interrogate him in my turn. Sir, I exclaim, I desire to know, I have the right to know where I am going and— Here, Warder Gaydon, he interrupted, you have no rights, all you have to do is to answer when you are spoken to. I protest. Protest then, replies this haughty and imperious personage, glancing at me menacingly. Then he disappears down the hatchway, leaving me face to face with Engineer Serko. If I were you, Warder Gaydon, I would resign myself to the inevitable, remarks the latter with a smile. When one is caught in a trap, one can cry out, I suppose. What is the use, when no one is near to hear you? I shall be heard some day, sir. Some day, that's a long way off. However, shout as much as you please. And with this ironical advice, Engineer Serko leaves me to my own reflections. Towards 4 o'clock, a big ship is reported about 6 miles off to the east, coming in our direction. She is moving rapidly and grows perceptibly larger. Black clouds of smoke pour out of her 2 funnels. She is a warship, for a narrow pennant floats from her mainmast, and though she is not flying any flag, I take her to be an American cruiser. I wonder whether the Ebba will render her the customary salute as she passes. No, for the schooner suddenly changes her course, with the evident intention of avoiding her. This proceeding on the part of such a suspicious yacht does not astonish me greatly, but what does cause me extreme surprise is Captain Spade's way of maneuvering. He runs forward to a signaling apparatus in the bows, similar to that by which orders are transmitted to the engine room of a steamer. As soon as he presses one of the buttons of this apparatus, the Ebba veers off a point to the southwest. Evidently an order of some kind has been transmitted to the driver of the machine of some kind, which causes this inexplicable movement of the schooner by the action of a motor of some kind, the principle of which I cannot guess at. The result of this maneuver is that the Ebba slants away from the cruiser, whose course does not vary. Why should this warship cause a pleasure yacht to turn out of its way? I have no idea. But the Ebba behaves in a very different manner when about 6 o'clock in the evening, a second ship comes in sight on the port bow. This time, instead of seeking to avoid her, Captain Spade signals an order by means of the apparatus above referred to and resumes his course to the east, which will bring him close to the said ship. An hour later, the 2 vessels are only about 4 miles from each other. The wind has dropped completely. The strange ship, which is a 3-masted merchantman, is taking in her topgallant sails. It is useless to expect the wind to spring up again during the night, and she will lay becalmed till morning. The Ebba, however, propelled by her mysterious motor, continues to approach her. It goes without saying that Captain Spade has also begun to take in sail, and the work, under the direction of the boatswain Effrondat, is executed with the same precision and promptness that struck me before. When the twilight deepens into darkness, only 1.5 miles separates the vessels. Captain Spade then comes up to me. I am standing on the starboard side, and unceremoniously orders me to go below. I can but obey. I remark, however, ere I go, that the boatswain has not lighted the headlamps, whereas the lamps of the 3 masters shine brightly, green to starboard and red to port. I entertain no doubt that the schooner intends to pass her without being seen, for though she has slackened speed somewhat, her direction has not been in any way modified. I enter my cabin under the impression of a vague foreboding. My supper is on the table, but uneasy, I know not why, I hardly touch it, and lie down to wait for sleep that does not come. I remain in this condition for 2 hours. The silence is unbroken save by the water that ripples along the vessel's sides. My mind is full of the events of the past 2 days, and other thoughts crowd thickly upon me. Tomorrow afternoon we shall reach our destination. Tomorrow I shall resume on land my attendance upon Thomas Rock, if it be necessary, said the Count d'Artigas. If, when I was thrown into that black hole at the bottom of the hold, I was able to perceive when the schooner started off across Pamlico Sound, I now feel that she has come to a stop. It must be about 10 o'clock. Why has she stopped? When Captain Spade ordered me below, there was no land in sight. In this direction, there is no island until the Bermuda Group is reached. At least there is none on the map, and we shall have to go another 50 or 60 miles before the Bermudas can be sighted by the lookout men. Not only has the Ebba stopped, but her immobility is almost complete. There is not a breath of wind, and scarcely any swell, and her slight, regular rocking is hardly perceptible. Then my thoughts turn to the merchantman, which was only a mile and a half off on our bow when I came below. If the schooner continued her course towards her, she must be almost alongside now. We certainly cannot be lying more than 1 or 2 cables' length from her. The three-master, which was becalmed at sundown, could not have gone west. She must be close by, and if the night is clear, I shall be able to see her through the porthole. It occurs to me that perhaps a chance of escape presents itself. Why should I not attempt it, since no hope of being restored to liberty is held out to me? It is true I cannot swim, but if I seize a life buoy and jump overboard, I may be able to reach the ship, if I am not observed by the watch on deck. I must quit my cabin and go up by the forward hatchway. I listen. I hear no noise, either in the men's quarters or on deck. The sailors must all be asleep at this hour. Here goes. I try to open the door, and find it is bolted on the outside, as I might have expected. I must give up the attempt, which after all had small chance of success. The best thing I can do is to go to sleep, for I am weary of mind, if not of body. I am restless and racked by conflicting thoughts, and apprehensions of I know not what. Oh, if I could but sink into the blessed oblivion of slumber. I must have managed to fall asleep, for I have just been awakened by a noise, an unusual noise, such as I have not hitherto heard on board the schooner. Day begins to peer through the glass of my porthole, which is turned towards the east. I look at my watch. It is 4:30. The first thing I wonder is whether the Ebba has resumed her voyage. No, I am certain she has not, either by sail or by her motor. The sea is as calm at sunrise as it was at sunset. If the Ebba has been going ahead while I slept, she is at any rate stationary now. The noise to which I referred is caused by men hurrying to and fro on deck, by men heavily laden. I fancy I can also hear a similar noise in the hold beneath my cabin floor, the entrance to which is situated abaft the foremast. I also feel that something is scraping against the schooner's hull. Have boats come alongside? Are the crew engaged in loading or unloading merchandise? And yet we cannot possibly have reached our journey's end. The Count d'Artigas said that we should not reach our destination till this afternoon. Now, I repeat, she was, last night, fully 50 or 60 miles from the nearest land, the group of the Bermudas. That she could have returned westward, and can be in proximity to the American coast, is inadmissible in view of the distance. Moreover, I have reason to believe that the Ebba has remained stationary all night. Before I fell asleep, I know she had stopped, and I now know that she is not moving. However, I shall see when I am allowed to go on deck. My cabin door is still bolted, I find on trying it, but I do not think they are likely to keep me here when broad daylight is on. An hour goes by and it gradually gets lighter. I look out of my porthole. The ocean is covered by a mist, which the first rays of the sun will speedily disperse. I can, however, see for half a mile, and if the three-masted merchantman is not visible, it is probably because she is lying off the other, or port, side of the Ebba. Presently I hear a key turned in my door, and the bolts drawn. I push the door open and clamber up the iron ladder to the deck, just as the men are battening down the cover of the hold. I look for the Count d'Artigas, but do not see him. He has not yet left his cabin. Aft, Captain Spade and Engineer Serco are superintending the stowing of some bales, which have doubtless been hoisted from the hold. This explains the noisy operations that were going on when I was awakened. Obviously, if the crew are getting out the cargo, we are approaching the end of our voyage. We are not far from port, and perhaps in a few hours, the schooner will drop anchor. But what about the sailing ship that was to port of us? She ought to be in the same place, seeing that there has been and is no wind. I look for her, but she is nowhere to be seen. There is not a sail, not a speck on the horizon either east, west, north, or south. After cogitating upon the circumstance, I can only arrive at the following conclusion, which, however, can only be accepted under reserve. Although I did not notice it, the Ebba resumed her voyage while I slept, leaving the three-master becalmed behind her, and this is why the merchantman is no longer visible. I am careful not to question Captain Spade about it, nor even Engineer Serko, as I should certainly receive no answer. Besides, at this moment Captain Spade goes to the signaling apparatus and presses one of the buttons on the upper disc. Almost immediately the Ebba gives a jerk, then with her sails still furled, she starts off eastward again. 2 hours later, the Count d'Artigas comes up through the main hatchway and takes his customary place aft. Serko and Captain Spade at once approach and engage in conversation with him. All three raise their telescopes and sweep the horizon from southeast to northeast. No one will be surprised to learn that I gaze intently in the same direction, but having no telescope, I cannot distinguish anything. The midday meal over, we all return on deck, all with the exception of Thomas Rock, who has not quitted his cabin. Towards 1 o'clock land is sighted by the lookout man on the foretop crosstree. Inasmuch as the Ebba is bowling along at great speed, I shall soon be able to make out the coastline. In effect, 2 hours later a vague semicircular line that curves outward is discernible about 8 miles off. As the schooner approaches it becomes more distinct. It is a mountain, or at all events very high ground, and from its summit a cloud of smoke ascends. What a volcano in these parts, it must then be. Chapter 8. Back Cups. In my opinion, the Ebba could have struck no other group of islands but the Bermudas in this part of the Atlantic. This is clear from the distance covered from the American coast and the direction sailed in since we issued from Pamlico Sound. This direction has constantly been south-southeast, and the distance, judging from the Ebba's rate of speed, which has scarcely varied, is approximately 750 miles. Still, the schooner does not slacken speed. The Count d'Artigas and Engineer Serko remain aft by the man at the wheel. Captain Spade has gone forward. Are we not going to leave this island, which appears to be isolated to the west? It does not seem likely, since it is still broad daylight, and the hour at which the Ebba was timed to arrive. All the sailors are drawn up on deck, awaiting orders, and Boatswain Effrondat is making preparations to anchor. Ere a couple of hours have passed, I shall know all about it. It will be the first answer to one of the many questions that have perplexed me since the schooner put to sea. And yet it is most unlikely that the port to which the Ebba belongs is situated on one of the Bermuda Islands, in the middle of an English archipelago. Unless the Count d'Artigas has kidnapped Thomas Rock for the British government, which I cannot believe. I become aware that this extraordinary man is gazing at me with singular persistence. Although he can have no suspicion that I am Simon Hart, the engineer, he must be asking himself what I think of this adventure. If Warder Gaydon is but a poor devil, this poor devil will manifest as much unconcern as to what is in store for him as any gentleman could, even though he were the proprietor of this queer pleasure yacht. Still, I am a little uneasy under his gaze. I dare say that, if the Count d'Artigas could guess how certain things have suddenly become clear to me, he would not hesitate to have me thrown overboard. Prudence, therefore, commands me to be more circumspect than ever. Without giving rise to any suspicion, even in the mind of Engineer Serko, I have succeeded in raising a corner of the mysterious veil, and I begin to see ahead a bit. As the Ebba draws nearer, the island, or rather islet, towards which she is speeding shows more sharply against the blue background of the sky. The sun, which has passed the zenith, shines full upon the western side. The islet is isolated, or at any rate I cannot see any others of the group to which it belongs, either to north or south. This islet, of curious contexture, resembles as near as possible a cup turned upside down, from which a fuliginous vapor arises. Its summit, the bottom of the cup, if you like, is about 300 feet above the level of the sea, and its flanks, which are steep and regular, are as bare as the sea-washed rocks at its base. There is another peculiarity about it which must render the islet easily recognizable by mariners approaching it from the west, and this is a rock which forms a natural arch at the base of the mountain, the handle of the cup, so to speak, and through which the waves wash as freely as the sunshine passes. Seen this way, the islet fully justifies the name of Back Cup given to it. Well, I know and recognize this islet. It is situated at the extremity of the archipelago of the Bermudas. It is the reversed cup, that I had occasion to visit a few years ago. No, I am not mistaken. I then climbed over the calcareous and crooked rocks at its base on the east side. Yes, it is Back Cup, sure enough. Had I been less self-possessed, I might have uttered an exclamation of surprise and satisfaction, which, with good reason, would have excited the attention and suspicion of the Count d'Artigas.